Erik, let's start on the offensive side of the ball
Okay.
for the Denver Broncos, a unit that some unimpressive metrics in some ways, led by a well-versed head coach, especially on the offensive side of the ball, a rookie quarterback who I mentioned this last night. I made jokes when the Broncos drafted Bo Nix. Like, I just wasn't expecting it, especially in the first round. Like, I remember somebody in their war room had like a shocked look on his face, and I remember screenshotting it to be like, oh, even this guy's surprised. But here we go. Like, Bo Nix, Peyton leaning into him a little bit. They remake the wide receiver room. They've got some speed. They've got some juice. They've got Cortland Sutton. They've got this myriad of running backs. They've got a very nasty offensive line that you have to strap in for when you
Yeah.
go against, especially Quinn Miners, who plays like a King Kong Godzilla type of mix there. A really
Mhm.
interesting unit from an individual standpoint, but also when we really start to dive into it, who they are schematically, how everything ties together, how Sean Payton has insulated Bo Nix a bit. I enjoyed I'd watch some Broncos games throughout the year, much more their defense than I did the offense. But in getting ready for this week, I found myself enjoying more of the schematics of this offense that I thought I would initially coming into this game.
Yeah, and it does start with Sean Payton and his staff. They've curated an offense that obviously fits Bo Nix's, his character, his personality, but also what he can do on the field. And it's that marriage of the zone. It's the run game, especially zone, which we're going to talk about tonight. That wide zone, mid zone run, tied with the bootleg and play action stuff, which the Broncos do a bunch of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that marriage between the run and the pass game and how they look so similar, but their run game overall, when you look at the numbers, they should be better. They should be
Right?
better than they are. They're 13th in attempts, 16th in yards. They're averaging 4.1 yards per rush. That's 21st overall. 12 touchdowns. That's 23rd. But their offensive line, as you said, is the strength of the offense, whether we're talking even in the run game and especially the pass game, which we'll get to later. But the run game, I mean, they're 8th overall in yards before contact per rush. That's at 1.62 yards. That's 8th overall. So there's something lacking there, and you'll see some of that stuff on film. But as I said, I think their offensive line is a strength, whether you're talking run or pass game. And I think the running backs they hit the holes in some of these zone runs that you're going to see here in a few minutes with the film, but they could be doing a lot more with this entire run game, not just that wide zone run, those mid zone runs, because again, that offensive line is so good.
Yeah, I still kind of think this a little bit. I thought they overpaid a bit for McGlinchey, bit for Ben Powers, but when you look at it paired together as a whole, especially the two guards and the two tackles, Bowles is extremely good. Powers has been solid. Miners has just been I remember Miners from last year in that game between Bills Broncos where him and Linval Joseph were battling, and he was like chucking Bernard and Dodson out of the club if he got to the second level. And then
Yes, he did
McGlinchey,
too.
even if they overpaid for McGlinchey a little bit, he's been a solidifying force at right tackle. And yeah, the nastiness, the physicality, they're double teams. They're trying to displace you through the end zone. McGlinchey's got a really nice gallop technique and just burying like three techs. And I guess, not surprised because, you kind of see it and sense it in the film a little bit. But yeah, tying into that run game a little bit, 24th in rushing DVOA, 25th in EPA per attempt for running back runs, 24th in EPA per attempt for running back runs on early downs, 18th in success rate for running back runs, 19th in success rate for running back runs on early downs. There is just that disconnect a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really think if their run game was more successful, how Peyton already, like you talked about, marries that run and pass game, man, if they had some semblance of if they left less meat on the bone with the run game, man, like I just feel like what this offense could potentially be going forward if they were able to get more of that, given what they do schematically and tying it together with the pass.
Right. And so the film that we're going to show here in a minute, it's going to focus on that wide zone run, the outside zone run. I talk about it in the film about being a throwback to John Elway, Terrell Davis, wide zone runs. They're actually not meant to get to perimeter. They're supposed to cut back up inside. They run mid zone, which if you're in the film room with us every week, we've broken down, mid zone several times this year. But so we're asking ourselves, who are they as a run team overall throughout the year? What concepts are they leading with? As I said, outside zone, 133 attempts this year, 578 yards, 4.3 a rush. Their second most run concept is man concept. So think duo, think ISO or lead plays like that. 80 attempts, 274 yards, 3.4 per rush. Again, that's their second most run type of concept. And their third is a lead play, usually with, a fullback or a tight end playing that H-back role. 77 attempts, 299 yards, 3.9 per rush. So again, these numbers aren't inspiring. They're not popping, off the screen. And when you watch the film, it's not popping off the film. But you see the last 4 games, again, they kind of switch it up a little more. There's still heavy outside zone, 42 attempts. They're adding some of that split zone. So some of that flow across the formation, those sift blocks by tight ends, fullbacks, and sometimes wide receivers. They're still doing the lead with 17 attempts, and then they added in some more inside zone at 17 attempts at 3.9 a rush. So that's who they are from a run concept perspective. But like I said, at the top, they should be better. And overall, you're going to see when we talk about the run game and the pass game, you watch their film on offense, you're going to see that it just gels really well and how it's going to make things difficult for the Bills pre to post snap. Because again, a lot of these plays, Anthony, right? They look very similar, and it's a very similar scheme and philosophy that we've seen from the Sean McVays, the Kyle Shanahans, as you'll see in some of this film. So real quick, let's get to this short breakdown on the Broncos run offense here. Over the last 4 games, the Broncos offense is ranked 7th. The Bills have their hands full with the Broncos offense on Sunday. Sean Payton has curated an offense that suits the personnel he has in place. The run and pass game mesh very well and are the type of Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay style of offense that have given the Bills defense fits at times because of how well the run and pass games are married. The Broncos primarily are an outside zone run team. They have run the concept 133 times for 4.3 yards per rush, and their offensive line blocks it up very well. The Broncos average 2.02 yards before contact per rush when running this play and have ripped off a 9.5% explosive play rate over the last 4 games. It's a throwback to the John Elway and Terrell Davis days where they ran wide zone runs looking for cutback lanes. They want to get the defense fast flowing horizontally down the line of scrimmage so that they can cut it back up inside for second level gains, but also to set up their play action boot game. Not only will this test the eye discipline and run gap integrity of the defense as a whole, but in my opinion, it will specifically test the Bills' interior defensive line. Their play will set the tone for this game. They will be up against 2 massive guards in Ben Powers, who's number 74, and Quinn Miners, who wears number 77. Here the Bengals align in an overfront with the 3 technique to the strength of the formation. The Broncos run zone weak. Powers torques the nose tackle to widen the hole for the running back, with Miners completely washing away the backside defensive tackle down the line of scrimmage, giving the running back a nice cutback lane up inside. In the same game, the Broncos used some eye candy prior to the snap to force the defense to have to adjust their structure as the ball is snapped. But also, they used some split flow post-snap to add in some misdirection. But it's still a zone run, this time mid-zone weak, which is generally categorized as an outside zone run by charting companies. On the snap, the Broncos run to the weak side bubble, so away from the 3 technique. But watch how Powers gets under the pads and turns the 3 technique defensive tackle, who will be Ed Oliver for the Bills. That makes the left tackle's job that much easier, but it also makes our running back's decision to cut it back behind those blocks easy as well. The timing exhibited by Powers and Miners on these zone runs are impressive. They do a great job of helping solidify the first level before scooping to the next level. This gets the Broncos' talented offensive linemen on linebackers, typically leaving the defensive backs for the tight ends. Here's another zone weak run with a cutback to the strength of the formation, which means the 3 technique defensive tackle is set to the strength of the formation. On this play, Miners feeds the nose tackle to the center, then climbs to the linebacker, with Powers immediately getting to the linebacker in space and covering him up so that the running back, Julian McLaughlin, can get to the 3rd level. The Bills have surrendered nearly 4 yards a carry against these sort of runs, and they have been tested recently by teams. The Bills settle in their nickel overfront, and on the snap, defensive tackle Jordan Phillips spikes into the A-gap, which then puts the onus on linebacker Balin Spector. He must beat the center to the B-gap, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to. When defensive tackles are bumped over a gap by offensive linemen or asked to exchange gaps, the linebackers, Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, will need to make those defensive tackles right. Here, Daquan Jones gets fed into the backside A-gap on this zone run, but Bernard read it quickly by replacing him. But more importantly, staying out ahead of the backside guard who is hunting for Bernard. Will Miners or Powers be able to get to the Bills linebackers? The Bills defensive tackles aren't primarily tasked with occupying blockers to keep the linebackers clean, making this a strategic battle in the trenches. However, the team's 3 technique defensive tackles must consistently work across the face of the backside offensive lineman, as Powers and Miners will look to seal off the Bills' fast-flowing linebackers. If those 3 techniques can scrape down the line on zone runs while the linebackers trigger quickly to out-leverage Denver's talented guards, the Bills have a strong chance of forcing the Broncos offense into a one-dimensional attack.
Your narration voice is so calming. I was like, like it's just like zoning out.
No, it's I like doing those, short segments just because you're able to flesh it out, a little easier, a little quicker, so that we can, talk about it more, and so that viewers can ask questions about it, because this is going to be a big thing. Again, outside zone, wide zone, mid zone runs are the type of plays that look like they're supposed to get outside, but they're actually meant to cut back up inside. And that means, again, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, you saw Jordan Phillips in there. Those guys are going to be incredibly important in this game because, as Carl says here, is that the Bills need to stay in their lanes and fill the gaps in the run defense, tackle. Yes, those zone blocks going from one side to the other, they're moving gaps. And so the defensive linemen and honestly the linebackers have only one gap. And if that gap's moving, they have to move in unison with those gaps, right, Anthony? And so there are going to be times where the tackles are going to get bumped out of their gap, or they're going to get reached. And now a linebacker has to, again, make him correct. And so that's why the relationship between a D tackle linebacker is something we love talking about, because sometimes a linebacker just has to make that D tackle right. The D tackle may have lost, but the linebacker can replace him and make him right.
Yeah, you had a great point in that segment of, talking about the gap exchanges. And sometimes they're by design. We'll see, hey, you're aligned in the A, you're going to jump to the B. The linebacker's in the B, he's going to jump the A. Sometimes by design. Sometimes it just happens. You get bumped over a gap because the linemen kick you out, and then that linebacker still has the ability to make you right. I thought that was a great point because it happens all the time. Sometimes it's by design. Sometimes it's not. But that's what the offense is trying to do. They're trying to change. You use gap scheme runs to remove and add gaps. You can still do it on zone by displacing guys and then creating or forcing the gap exchange to happen. And then now the defense has to recognize it on the fly. And if they don't, you get hit for big runs. And, I thought you really nailed it with the outside zone run aspect. And like you've said multiple times, including in that video, how well it pairs with their play action game and just the marriage and everything. 12% design rollout rate, aka like boots, number 1 in the league. Also, 14% screen rate, which is 4th. They will just pair everything together of that wide zone and then use that to. I mean, we've talked about it for years with the Shanahan and McVay tree, how well that outside zone game pairs with the boot. Bo Nix is an athletic QB. You get him on the move. You scheme and design guys open. When it works, it really works. And against the Bills defense that has shown vulnerability, especially on the interior, and talking about defensive tackles being displaced vertically, horizontally, guys getting out of gaps, guys getting too far upfield. There is a legitimate recipe and blueprint naturally for how the Broncos already operate for giving the Bills defense a problem.
Yeah, you don't want those power interior offensive linemen to create that displacement on a Bills D line that is, as everyone knows, pretty much undersized when you're relative to the league. And so you don't want that displacement. And then when you start moving the gaps like that horizontally, there's a chance for guys to be out of their gaps, and that gap integrity is challenged. And you don't want Miners and Power scooping to that next level without any disruption or without any repercussions. If that guy's going to scoop to the next level, one of those guards quickly and not hang back and help the backside offensive lineman on these zone runs, well, then Ed Oliver has to get on his horse to get down the line of scrimmage to go make that tackle, like Carl said. That's incredibly important. You saw when those backup D tackles were in, Jordan Phillips and Austin Johnson against the Patriots, and they ran that to the strength. They ran that mid zone, that wide zone run. Yeah. You saw them stay front side because Jordan Phillips got sealed, but you also didn't see Austin Johnson scrape down line of scrimmage because he got sealed off. And then Cole Bishop got picked off at the second level. So it's just a domino effect. And it starts up front. As we say each and every week, it starts up front.
Yeah, 100%. Having a game where the run game can still be a factor for an opponent is not ideal. We've been talking about it for a while in the show, how they've stopped the run with, run blitzes, numbers, bodies in the box, but also game script coming into play, and game script being a huge fan. I don't remember when. I think maybe after the Baltimore game is when I put game script enthusiast underneath like my tag here. And it's just, it continues to play a role for this Bills defense from the run standpoint. And that's where it starts. If Sean Payton gets his way, Bo Nix, I don't know, throws the ball like 17 times, 10 of them are probably play action. And then, nice, yeah, from Adam. Yeah, it is a very big buzzword this year, especially when in relation to the Bills. But if Payton gets his way, Nix probably throws the ball 17 times, 10 of them are play action. He probably go 13 of 17. He gets to run the ball a ton, make life easy for Bo with some slide routes and some overs and just quick little dump offs and some tight end delays and leaks and all these pieces. And they can chew up clock. You keep the ball away from Josh Allen. You move the ball, so on and so forth. And that running game, that's good for the running game in and of itself in a vacuum. But then also how that ties into the passing game, which is another area, Eric, as we led off with talking about this offensive line, they are maulers. They are nasty in the run game. But how they function is a significant part, obviously, in the passing game. And then how that ties into Nix's play style, his athleticism. Again, there is, despite what the numbers say in a bunch of ways, like this offense does have a sound design and game plan that they implement each week.
Right. And I don't think it's going to take a lot of tools or assets or resources to slow down the run game of the Broncos. I agree. Try to get them one dimensional and shut that run game down, whether you got to run those gap exchanges between the D linemen and the linebackers, maybe bring some nickel or safety run blitzes off the edge to, again, fill all those the gaps and shut that down so that it doesn't get going. Get Bo Nix in that drop back game. Very similar game plan to Jared Goff. And I know Goff went off.
Yeah.
But I just don't expect that from Bo Nix with what Sean Sherman Babish has done.
He also went off after the Bills were up 35-14 and put them in that hole. Like and to your point, exactly, like put them in true drop back situations, no passing down in distances. I just don't, no disrespect to Bo Nix, I don't think Bo Nix is going to do what Goff does. Also, Sutton is sweet, but there is no Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta and this whole cavalcade of weapons. Like that game script is going to significantly impact them much more than it even would the Lions.